Thank you, Dr. Chappell. Our next pre-recorded presentation is from legendary plantsman, IPPS Fellow and Meadows Award winner, UGA professor, and plant breeder extraordinaire, Dr. Michael Dirr. Dr. Dirr is now president of Chestnut Oak Farm and an active partner in Premier Introductions Incorporated. He has generously shared his time through a tour of PII, showcasing the best performers and those to come. Dr. Dirr will be tuning in live to answer your questions following this video.
First, I'll say welcome to my fellow plant propagators. And I missed last year's meeting, and obviously we're all missing this year's meeting except by Zoom, which is probably not the way to conduct business. I have listened to various podcasts on my computer, and I thought I'd shoot myself. So hopefully you don't have guns when you're listening to this, and we'll go from there. And by the way, I'm Mike Dirr. My partner's in PI. This is our new company, or I should say kind of a reinvention of our old company. It's called Premier Introductions Incorporated. We wanted to keep the PII. We like that kind of pie symbol. And we started January 1. We sold our company originally to Bailey and closed the deal, I think it was 5 years ago. I know it was 5 years ago. Had a non-compete, couldn't do much of anything, no hybridizing anything. We still grow plants and source seed or whatever. But what you're looking at in front of you and behind you, and as we go through today and take a few photos here and there, it's all it's all open pollinated seed. This year we made a ton of controlled crosses. We've already collected seed. We still have more in our little propagation house over here. As the seed matures, we collect the hydrangea seed and whatever else we happen to be breeding. But what you're looking at is pretty amazing. If you have a good mama, a good maternal parent, and every breeder out there from Tom Rainey to Tim Wood and Spring Meadow to wherever in the world knows that open pollinated material can be great, but you got to know what you're looking for. And our goals are, hydrangeas are still the big issue. I just got printed out this morning, actually, the new, at least the hydrangea section from the new Spring Meadow 2021 catalog. And I counted 7 new ones. And some of them I can't tell if they're just a rename of old ones. It seems like they might be. But the fact that they don't quit, there's 12 pages of hydrangeas here. And I wrote down numbers. There's 12 paniculata and 11 macrophylla. And what's happened over the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years, is that paniculata jumped and jumped and jumped. And I'll give you an example. Tom Demeline, president of Willowway Nursery, said they sell about 280,000 hydrangeas a year. Macrophyllas were in the 50s, paniculatas were in the 40%, and take you even down a little lower on the things. So things like serrata were 0.7%. So if you're going to breed, and you're going to breed for the market, what are you going to aim for? You're going to aim for arborescens to some degree, which are a little higher, but certainly macrophylla and paniculata. And what you're looking at here is this year's selections. This is second bloom. These were cut back on July 15th of this year. And I'll just say in simple terms, it's amazing. There's also some paniculatas I brought up to show you. These are all first sequence bloom on these from seedlings of, we're using, I won't tell you what parents, but we're using as many maternal parents as we can find, and I've collected seed actually in West Tennessee, where they have a gigantic evaluation hydrangea paniculata collection. And what's really amazing, that a lot of this material, we always want it to flower faster. We want stronger stems. We want cleaner foliage. This is, I guess I can say it, this is a phantom seedling that I just picked out today, and it's absolutely amazing. When you propagate these and regrow them normally, the flower size is going to shrink. It'll probably be 2/3 the size. But the flowers are unbelievably impressive. And this is what the public wants. In fact, the filmmaker here and Bree were just talking about, if this was in a garden center now, it would literally walk out the door. And we've been able to shake out some pinks. We've never gotten anything deep as deep as Invincible Spirit 2, Invincible Spirit Ruby. We know we can do it, and we will do it. We've already made crosses on that. But what I like about what you're looking at, and again, I'm not going to tell you the parent, is, and this is something we really shoot for, the two, Jeff Beasley, my partner, and Mark Griffith are both growers, both either own nurseries. Still, Jeff just went back in business, and Jeff's always looking at the root system. And I've looked at enough arborescens over the years where you lift them up out of a container and half the root ball falls away. So we've been able to get great root systems on some of these, and this is a classic of, we bred these things for strong stems back in, this is a 10 gallon or a 7 gallons heavy, back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, and we threw them all away. We never came up with anything what we thought was better than Annabelle. Well, a bunch of them, many landed in the Dirr garden, which you may see on this video tomorrow, I don't know. But there's one that lasted, and this was the one that my wife came in. Many of you know Bonnie, you know Bonnie anyway. She comes in and said, Mike, there's a plant in that front bed that looks great. It's got big flowers on it. It's dark green foliage and it isn't dead. So obviously I got cuttings, and we've been looking at this thing for the last several years. This is the cut back again. So July 15th, this is rebloom. But if the camera's picking this up or any kind of close up, I mean, it is a dark green. It is the darkest green, the most lustrous sheen I've seen on an arborescence. And again, great root systems, easy to propagate, and certainly easy to grow. So we're hopeful. By the way, I know I'm talking to propagators. We're not supposed to talk business, but this is business. I'm out here and you're there, and you want to succeed and we want to succeed. This stuff is all open season. There's anybody that wants to visit us and talk to us and is not afraid of COVID, maybe next year, 2021, we'd love to have you here. We're show and tell. We're, as I mentioned earlier, to the photographer, we're equal opportunity breeders. We go A to Z, and the door is open to anyone who is remotely interested and wants to work out a relationship for the future. We're in the largely hydrangea macrophyllus and serratus now. We were looking at arborescens and paniculata. And macrophylla, as I mentioned, is still the largest seller. And every time you pose the question to a potential licensee that you got a new hydrangea macrophylla, the first question they ask you is, does it rebloom? Does it rebloom? They don't ask it once, they ask you 10 times, and they want proof that it actually does that. So if you're breeding, I know Tom Rainey and anybody else involved in breeding, certainly Spring Meadow, if you look at their new catalog, you'll see rebloom, 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 rebloom. We've been working on, we're probably the first actually, in fact we started at UGA back in the late 90s and have moved on through, and as many of you know, we work with Bailey, and they've got Summer Crushes, our latest, Bloomstruck, etc. Twist and Shout, Blushing Bride, those all came from either UGA or from Plant Introductions Breeding. What I'm showing you today are, I couldn't do any breeding in the last 5 years, but that doesn't mean I can't keep my eyes open and travel. And most of you are familiar, you walk your nursery every day, you see branch sports. Well, this is a mophead sport of Twist and Shout, and many of you grow it. It's loose, it's lanky, it's a best rebloomer. It blooms a month quicker than the traditional Endless Summer, Oak Hill, Pennymac, David Ramsey, Decatur Blue, which were the original rebloomers. Deeper flower color, as you'll probably be able to see later on. Relatively clean foliage. Again, October 5th, and you're looking at foliage that isn't full of Cercospora. And there's buds coming from the top, and you can see some of the stems here. So this was a real find. My wife and I were together. I'm not going to tell you where we found it. We found it, we propagated it, we got permission. Propagated it, built it up, and is now licensed to both Greenleaf Nursery and to the Synergy Group. And Synergy Group is more or less a consortium of northern nurseries, Over to Vest, Pride's Corner, Willow Ways, and their shared nursery in Canada, and Saunders Brothers, who obviously is in our southern region. So I like what I see here. We've had it since 2017, so 4 years, and it's still popping. We have another new one. It isn't out here. This is called Rock and Roll. It's been patented. Patent's approved. We're all complete with that. I have another one called Azure Skies, which is an Endless Summer look-alike, except it reblooms more heavily. Good foliage, early bloom, heavy bloom, and that's been patented too as Azure Skies, trademark Azure Skies. And then one that's kind of in the annals of history has been lost. It came from England originally. It's called Green Mantle. Lost to England, went to Australia, brought back to New England by Mal Condon, who's curator of the hydrangea collection on Cape Cod at Heritage Gardens. We got it. It has a pink and a green kind of mottled, froggy kind of inflorescence. Thick sepals, compact. It does get Cercospora. It's relatively clean compared to many things that I'll show you in a second. And good fall color, excellent fall color. And the flowers hold and hold and hold and hold. It is not a rebloomer. The other two I mentioned, Azure Skies and Rock and Roll, are potent rebloomers. But you can see now, just pulled out of our trenches back here under our shade cloth, it's still looking good. It's a good way to put it. And when people see it in flower, they go, wow, wow, wow. We've had a lot of visitors look at this. This was been around for, actually, this was found, I think, and I got to remember the dates, I think it was found in the 40s or 50s, by the fellow in England, and then just kind of moved around. They said it was a sport of Goliath. DNA was done on this. It is not a sport of Goliath, on and on. At the same time, I was talking about leaf spot before. This is Cercospora on White Wave. This is a 1900 to 1910 hybrid from Lemoyne or Moulier, I'm not sure which one. Beautiful white lace cap. However, it looks like a leopard in terms of the foliage, and it's just ugly as sin. And we have worked on our breeding here, and we don't have it all right either, but we continue to hammer away. And if you can see this, and close up at all, for clean foliage. And so these are seedlings from this year selected for foliage. Also for, as soon as we see a flower bud on a seedling, we grab it. This is a mop head. You can look at one and tell pretty quickly. Pretty red stems, glossy dark green foliage, and who knows if it's going to be any good. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but I know it's a heck of a lot better than white wave that I'm looking at here. And then possibly one of the more exciting things is Spring Meadow figured it out a long time ago. I was in Iowa at a conference in February, a tree conference. Tim Wood was there from Spring Meadow. And we were talking about where breeding is going to go in hydrangeas. And he said there's only one way to go. You got to integrate other species, Serrata, Scandens, Lutea venosa, Angustipedala, into Macrophylla. Macrophyllas are we're in a cul-de-sac as far as breeding. We're chasing our tail, and we're not going to get anywhere unless we move new genes into the genome of these hybrids. And here's a perfect example. I got two sources of wild collected material from South Korea, North Korea. They survived minus 30, listen to this, minus 30 Fahrenheit. I won't tell you where in hell they came from. This is my first generation seedling from one of the minus 30 parents. And the only reason I selected it because of the fall color. And the second reason is it's clean as a whistle. It's amazing. So this is straight serrated. We've already incorporated this into every macrophylla we could get our hands on that was a rebloomer. This is not a rebloomer. It's a pink lace cap. It's very, very pretty. But are you going to sell a serrata? And I gave you numbers for serrata from Willoway, 0.7%. You're going to go broke if you try to do it. But the fact is, the future sits or resides in this genotype that you're looking at here, Hydrangea serrata from Korea, both North and South Korea. And then lastly on macrophyllas, and by now you're probably asleep in your chair, or you've had 5 beers and you've fallen out of your chair. But we're also working with hopefully color types, and we have yellow and we have purple. And we get a lot of response from these. The problem is we can't get reblooming into them. We've made crosses with the purple. We have not made crosses with the yellow. But I won't tell you what the parentage is on this, but it's quite interesting. It's compact. That's a 1-year seedling, and it has held its color through this summer, which hasn't been the hottest on record, but still hot enough. And then the purple ones, we have tons of these. Bailey Nursery's also got a bunch of these. They got better ones. And genetics started at UGA on these. We call them Lilacina. This is red leaf Lilacina. And we got hundreds, maybe thousands of seedlings out here, and we've been slowly picking the best. But we've only had 2 that have flower buds, and if we could get a mop pad with purple foliage and a rebloomer on this genetic plant or this makeup, we'd be off and running. So that's kind of the macrophylla story quickly without boring you too badly. Hey, we're in a different pea patch at PII. This is kind of a mini collection of Distillium. And these are all seedlings that actually, these belong to the university. My son's done a little breeding. Matt's got about 10, 12 patents now. And he worked with licensed material, McCorkle to Greenleaf. Who else has got? I don't know if Bailey's got anything or not, but this is his latest crop. And I tell you what, as Distilliums go, and I've looked at a bunch of them, we started the Distillium pandemic, if you will, back in 2005 and 6, and it spread. PDSI has a couple, Greenleaf has a couple, Bailey's got all the stuff that Bailey has came from us. Matt has several, and we talk a lot. I just love this one. This is one of the best I've seen to date. This was, just to give you an idea, this was potted on 10, 11, 19, so we're looking at literally about a year here. If the original plant was 15 inches tall, it looks like a pancake, and maybe a 15-inch pancake. Just keeps spreading, so I don't think it's going to be bigger than maybe, I'll say 18 inches, 2 feet, and just spread, not indefinitely, but it stayed low, and it consistently in the heat, it produces those beautiful tip ends, purple ends. There's a bunch of others in here. I'm not going to go through and wear you out. But these have been licensed again to McCorkle and to Greenleaf. There's one that is really, I think, again, very, very unusual. It's a small leaf form. It's close to boxwood size. And again, these haven't been pruned, so these are just left to rips. And they're all, I think we potted them all at the same time. Yeah, 10, 11, 19. So you got a saleable plant without doing pretty much any work except throwing some fertilizer on them, which we did. And that was it. But Distilliums, we started in 2005-6. People chastised us, said, who knows a Distillium? Who's going to buy a Distillium? Well, take a look at the marketplace now. They're chock-a-block full, and there's more on the way. Jim's got this camera on. I'm just going to keep walking and talking. I love eccentric plants, and I pulled this one today because it's going to go home and it's going to go in my garden. Since I just Kubotoized about 4 trees over the weekend. 2 stinking peach trees, by the way. Don't tell me you can grow fruit without spraying, because You can't. I had a ton of fruit on, they were all full of disease. Anyway, this is a new red bud that many years ago, a lady wrote me and said, I got this red bud with zigzag stems. And I said, so what? Sends me pictures, semi-weeping, but I don't know if you can focus in on here. The stems are free. Anybody got a pruner? I wish I had my pruner with me. I'd cut it off. I could probably snap this one off. This is a lower little branch. And I don't know if you can see this, but it's actually beautiful in the wintertime. It's got this wonderful texture, and I can see snow accumulating on the branches. I think you can see it. This was given to me by Alex Newbar. I believe this is going to be patented. You take a look at the stem, it looks like something that you'd typically train, or to get that stage, wrap a vine around a stake to get that kind of curlicue effect. It is pink flowered, and I was thinking about it this morning. I pulled this out for show and tell. I just wondered if any kind of seedling population out of this would yield anything like this. And it's probably going to be a recessive trait, so you'd have to go through a couple generations to get there. Just for point of reference, I'm a big believer in Baptisia. And the bees love Baptisia. I grow Baptisia, semi-breed Baptisia. These are rooted cuttings from some of my selections. This year I got 3 different selections. This is actually one called Brownie Points, which is known. But you root them, you pot them in cells, or they're rooted in cells. You transplant them to, these are kind of a trade gown, some extra pots, and you're ready to go in the ground. These are all going to go in the Dirr garden, and see if we get anything different out of it. And I'm curling it. One other side of things, you turn that camera a little bit, I'm keeping you moving here. This is what all of you know what seedling variation amounts to, but these are Magnolia virginiana, and these both came from the same parent, from one called Celtic, which is one of Dwayne Moon's introductions. Celtic's a small leaf evergreen, and take a look at this. This almost looks like a magnolia. If Todd Lassane or some of the crazies out there, Dave Creech, who love goofy foliage plants, this is a candidate for goofy foliage. It looks like a Manglesia insignis, now Magnolia insignis. It's got the big, long tropical leaf. And what's amazing about this thing is that it branches to the base, and then the branches come out almost at a 90-degree angle and then kind of turn up. So it makes a full plant, dark green, new foliage bronze, and this is a seedling out of the same bunch. And I don't get too excited about that. So as I said, it doesn't take too many seedlings to produce something that's kind of unique. Well, we got the camera trained. These were all on the Christmas list for the IPPS. I could keep you guys for days, as you probably know. And so far, so good. These are a couple of viburnum nudum, native from Connecticut to literally down to, I know I've seen it down in Weeks Bay Regional Wildlife Area, down in the Mobile area, and probably goes into Texas, grows in swamps. And magnificent fall color, fruit green, pink to blue. Wonderful plant. National Arboretum had 2. This was a tall one. I don't remember the exact numbers on these. And this is a little dwarf one. And these are the same age, by the way, from rooted cuttings. The root's easy from cuttings, and the root system, I don't know, I can't even get it. I was going to take it out and show my fellow IPPSers the root system, but the root system shows itself, pop it to the bottom of the pot. And what's amazing about this, I saw this originally at the Germplasm Repository up in Beltsville, 3 feet tall, 5 feet wide, inflorescences, I should say infructescences, as large as the normal species, probably 5 inches across, 4 to 5 inches. And I got seed, germinated them, and everything I got back from the seed was this. Well, I was able to get cuttings. They shared cuttings with me. They haven't released this yet, but I put five of these in daughter Katie's new house, her garden, and it's beautiful. And I know it's deciduous, but you got fall color, you got flower, you got tight stems, and it's something different. You know, it's not another boxwood, it's not another Ilex crenata, another vomitoria, and you got seasonality with this. It's just absolutely beautiful. So, Viburnum nudum, a dwarf one, U.S. National Arboretum, and a tall one, both under number. And I talked to Richard Olson about whether they're going to release it, and it might be coming. They don't move as fast as we do in this part of the world. Okay, this is kind of the last stop in sort of the varied shrub category, but we're looking at Fothergilla, and as many of you know, I introduced Mount Airy 40 years ago, and it's still probably the biggest selling Fothergilla. And behind me is a whole collection that was, I think Tom Rainey was involved in this, Rick Lewandowski, somebody from the National Arboretum. They had like 26 or so collections or accessions. I was able to pick 12 that I thought were outstanding, and they're okay, but okay is not good enough. And there's a saying in plant breeding or plant evaluation that good is the enemy of great. And if it isn't great, then the hell with it, pretty much. Well, Bobby Green sent me one that was collected in Alabama, and it's called Red. Yeah, it's called, the guy who collected it was Fred Nation, Nation, and they named it Redneck Nation since it came from Alabama. But it's a true gardenia. The foliage is relatively clean, early fall color, an excellent fall color and flower. And I've been looking for a Fothergilla forever that is clean right into fall until fall color expression. So I'm over at my tree buddy, John Malone, who owns a tree nursery called Summershade close by. And I'm walking around his lake, and he's got a bunch of Fothergilla seedlings. And I say, what is this? And he said, well, I got a bunch of Fothergilla seedlings, and I stuck them in, and this is one of them. Brilliant, brilliant red fall color. And as anybody, the two people that are videoing this thing can know, clean as a whistle. The cleanest, and you look at the other 12, 13, 14 in there, nowhere close. And what I found out in terms of rooting cuttings, I've already got a couple flats of cuttings off this one. I had dug a couple sprouts last, I could probably go on there, 22120. I dug the sprouts, a couple of sprouts I just left on. It's kind of suckered, so I was able to get some good cuttings. I've tried KIBA, okay, I've done Dynagel. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dynagel, and I think our propagators have, but I use Clonex. Clonex has got 0.31 IBA, so it's 3,100 parts per million IBA, and it's in some kind of purple goo. And boy, does it root them. I just looked at a flat this morning that's rooted in about 2 or 3 weeks. And Fothergilla will give you fits under mist sometimes, but the foliage still looks good. They've already got roots coming out. So you might consider Clonex. And also this Dynagel is quite good too. It's a mixture of IBA and NAA, and it's a lower kind. It's about 2/10 something IBA and maybe 1/10, a little bit more NAA, and it's in some kind of gooey. It's like a Jello almost. You just dip your cuttings in. So if you're having problem rooting some of these things, they kind of have given you fits in the past. But look at the foliage on it. I absolutely love this plant. The parent plant was about 5 feet tall, and I've got pictures of it in fall color. If there's any way I can send you an image and you could put it in there, I would do it. This could be good. The last Fothergilla I saw introduced was one called Legends of the Fall, which is introduced by Spring Meadow. It came from a guy up in Massachusetts, and I don't know why if it's any better than the old Mount Airy. I don't see it. So anyway, that's a change. And then lastly, we worked with Raphaelepis 20 years ago, and we kept about 4. And this is the one that is actually being tested by licensed to Greenleaf, and it's amazing. Overhead water, no leaf spot, white flowers, and who wants a Raphaelepis? I don't know. I see Raphaelepis around here, and they got half the leaves on because, especially in shade, water drips on them. They don't dry out. Boom, they're gone. Well, I'd like to thank you for number one, putting up with me, and number two, listening to sort of a garbled voice here, an old man's voice, kind of show you the joys of plants, or sharing. I like to say sharing the joys of plants. I think we're all in this for the same reason that number one, we got to feed our families, but we all love it. We're particularly inspired by plants. And if there's anything my colleague Armitage ever said that I thought made sense, was that what we produce, what we do, we nourish people's souls, and I truly believe that. And I think there's no place like a garden as a sanctuary, just a restful place, a peaceful place, certainly a spiritual place, on and on and on. So keep up the good work. I hope you'll see more and better plants as you go through your series of videos. But you're welcome to visit us. I think Mark, Jeff, and I invite you in 2021 if a pandemic comes down. If not, as soon as possible, because seeing is believing, and smelling and touching and caressing, and seeing the potential to make millions of dollars off premier introductions plants. Thank you.
Now we have Dr. Dirr live to answer your questions. And I know that the chat was blowing up, so we have a lot to address.
So, Bree, I'll start. But before we've got 3 questions already for Dr. Dirr, but for full disclosure, I got my master's degree with Dr. Dirr in 1981, and for all of you that are hearing him maybe for the first time, he's actually calmed down in the last 30 years. So if you can imagine the pace at which I tried to keep up with him that many years ago, but he's a dear, dear friend and a wonderful asset to our industry. So thank you, Dr. Dirr. So I'll start with the first question. Is there any work being done in breeding Hydrangea macrophylla with a later bloom date to avoid spring frost?
Am I on?
Yes.
You can hear me? I'm thinking about later flowering dates.
The answer is no, and most of it's earlier. Things like Angusta pedula, Lutea venosa, scandens are all earlier, and there's been significant work, especially with scandens. I don't know how many of you have heard of Runaway Bride, the Snow White, the new one out of Japan, and there's one called French Bolero, which is a Macrophylla scandens. That's another new one. The Runaway Bride has been renamed Fairy Trail Bride by Spring Meadow, and it's in their new catalog. You might take a look at it. So they're going for a totally different shape, kind of a graceful, almost ground cover type, almost a good hanging basket plant. And I've tested the plant for a year, and it's not the hardiest thing, but the flowers are beautiful. The sepals are probably an inch across, and they're the decals, they have that serrated sort of margin to them. So very, very beautiful, shiny foliage. And what all the breeders were thinking about with using scandens was to flower it up and down the stem. Scandens, Lutea venosa, Angusta pedula also flower at every node. So the idea was to put literally, Brussels sprouts on hydrangeas, mop heads, and I think the mop heads are coming too. But kind of back to the question about later, no, I know Sandy Reed, many of you know Sandy from USDA, ARS, National Arboretum, crossed paniculata with Macrophylla, and I believe had one flower, but it was a mule. It was sterile. So that would, again, Jim, I'm thinking as I'm talking here, that would be the only way to probably get them later, although you can select. My partners and I worked yesterday morning. We had the McCorkle lurker in for a visit, and we selected another 50 hydrangea macrophyllas, and it's something we'll start looking at. I didn't think of it that way. All you ever hear from anybody is they want them earlier. They want them for the 3 months of what they call 12 weeks of hell in spring when people are in the garden centers. So I better cut it off here. I'm going over time. Okay, back to you, Jim.
All right, I'll ask the second question from Keith from Texas. Does Viburnum nudum clone require pollinators to get fruits?
Oh, I'm back on again. Who is that smart guy that asked that question? Actually, yes. We had, by itself, there's nothing. It's white flowered, and there's essentially, you might get an occasional fruit, but not much. But with the tall upright one I showed you, yes, the fruit set is great. So it does. In answer to your question, it does require a pollinator. I assume almost any viburnum will cross any other one if they flowers at the same time, or at least serve as a pollinator. You may not get a good fruit set or viable seed. But I think this is just seeing the plant originally, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, whatever it was, my first word out of my mouth was wow. And I I asked Richard, I wrote him not too long ago and asked him if they're going to introduce it. And they're working on it. But it's something our industry could use. And if you look at that container I held up, the root says obviously a wet soil tolerant plant. The roots go right down the bottom of the plant, right into the fabric or the gravel. So it's an easy to grow. It's easy to root, the big fleshy roots, and it would be a choice candidate. I think the average customer goes in a garden center would be unable to tell whether it was a broadleaf evergreen or if it was a deciduous shrub, flowering shrub. So it's going to have some commercial legs if it ever gets out there.
Okay, and Dr. Dirr, I'll take the next one. It's from Steve. On the Baptisia, is there a chance to increase the flower density through breeding? Well,
I grow not hundreds but thousands of seedlings, and I made the three. I had brownie points. I lifted up. That's a known cultivar, but I made 3 selections this year. One was purple foliage that I call violet haze, and a deep purple flower on a very tightly packed inflorescence. And it's a great question you asked. Is I got some that have the loosest, flower inflorescence, and nobody's going to buy it. But everything, I look for strong stems. I'd like to get compact. I don't see that. I'm still 3-foot range. But the flower, all the inflorescences are, which is a raceme, are stacked, literally the flowers on top of each other. So there's no real big gaps between one flower and another flower as you move up and down the stem. So yeah, that's a good question. And visually, they're beautiful. I got a pure white. I got what I would call a true blue, and then the one I mentioned, the deep purple with purple foliage. I'm kind of working towards foliage color too. Everybody's got a Baptisia, and then Spring Meadows got the Decadent series, and I think there was a lot out of Walter's Gardens, and I don't know who else is doing it, but it isn't only with especially with especially with Baptisia, the foliage is one of those perennials you can find it in Maine, you can find it in Georgia, and doing well in the garden. But the foliage offers that sort of extension for improvement. And I think a purple foliage one, kind of like Dr. Werner was talking about with his red buds, would extend the interest and the reach and the economic gain.
I want to go back. Tim, I think that's Tim Wood from Spear Meadow Nursery. Tim made a comment about Brandywine viburnum nudum, and he said it fruits without a pollinator. So that's from Tim Wood.
Can I comment on that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't believe everything Tim Wood says, and he doesn't believe everything Mike Dirr says. So if it's true, it's great. And I've seen Brandywine in gardens like Brookside Garden up in Wheaton, Maryland, etc. But they were planted with multiple cultivars, so you're going to get fruit. So I don't know the answer. I don't know. Tim, you want to verify that by sending me a Brandywine? I'll plant it out in a 50-acre field by itself, and we'll find out.
Maybe this is a job for the host, Cheryl Boyer, that she could put you, in a separate room. Put you two, put Dirr and Tim in a separate room. I think there's a function in Zoom that we could do that. But before she does that, we have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions for you, and also for the previous presenters. So I'm gonna ask you the next one. You already asked the Baptisia. So the next question is about the Nyssa. Have you seen any good Nyssa from Phil?
You're talking about Nyssa sylvatica? Is that the question?
Yes, Nyssa. I guess just a Nyssa in general.
There's Mike. I don't know if any of you know Mike Heyman, but Mike's was a photographer, Louisville Courier Journal, and a great plantsman, tree lover, and active in Louisville circles and tree planting around that area. And Mike and I have been buddies forever. Mike introduced Red Rage, which is still one of the cleanest. The biggest problem with Nyssa is simply the leaf spot, which I never knew what it was. Richard Olson looked it up. It's something like, and this is going to kill you, but it's Mycosporella Nyssa-cola. I can hardly pronounce it. I can spell it, but I hardly pronounce it. Causes little black spots on the leaves, defoliation. I got almost a 70-footer in the garden here, and the leaves are almost gone. But there's vast differences in Nyssa susceptibility. So we do have better ones for sure. One of the better ones, I got Green Gable in the garden. It's relatively clean. I got Wildfire in the garden. It's relatively clean. Afterburner, which is one from Smith's, is a disaster. It's a female. And, I could go through these and bore you to death. But Mike has a collection. We're doing an evaluation collection. We're going to publish it in Nursery Management up in Louisville on a golf course area that he's been able to get between the fairways, et cetera. And he just sent me a report not too long ago. So, yeah, there are better Nissas, and there's more Nissas coming down the road. J. Frank Smith, I go typically out there every August looking at their collection. And at one time, Keith Warren was telling me they were looking at 30 different Nissas from around the country. Nissa's pretty interesting. It runs from, I don't know if any of you know this, it runs from Maine. I've seen it wild, and I've been in the Okefenokee Swamp, literally boating by Nyssa sylvatica out into not Jim's country, but out in Texas, out to Dave Creech's country. I assume it's probably in East Texas. So it's a great tree. The nursery industry can't produce enough for the most part. Tougher to graft, a little tougher to grow. And it's sort of replacing ash trees in some parts of the country and some other trees. So, yeah, whoever asked the question has obviously thought about it. So thanks for asking the question.
Okay, and we've got one more question for you, Dr. Dirr. Is there a cultivar name for the Raphiolepis that you showed?
No. The question was, is there a cultivar name for the Raphiolepis? No. And in fact, who did I just talk to? I showed it to McCorkle yesterday. They got a new one coming out. They're growing a couple. I think they're growing Snowcap and Eleanor Tabor, one of those two. And well, I've been impressed by this. Nobody seemed to be. People have passed by this Raphiolepis for literally almost 20 years, 18 years, and pretty much just shrugged their shoulders. And who wants a Rafael-Lepis? So it seems like there's some renewed interest. And if you go into Florida, we had our IPPS meeting, Southern Region of Tampa, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 4. And we were walking campus, University of Tampa, and if there was one, there was 10,000 Rafael-Lepis. So there's still a home. There's still a home for them, certainly, but no name on this yet. And we propagated it, repropagated it, propagated it. Continues to be clean. Hopefully, somebody will take it and run with it. I mean, Greenleaf's looking at it, and maybe they'll make a decision.
Dr. Creech, are you ready? Ready to answer some questions? Dr. Creech. Okay, Dr. Creech, have you used foliar applied KIBA with Hortus IBA water-soluble salts, root-in solutions?
Dave, you're still muted. Go down to your window and click on the microphone button that says mute. There you
Okay,
go.
am I on?
Yes.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Dave, I miss you, buddy.
What was the question? KIBA is a foliar?
Have you used foliar applied KIBA with Hortus IBA water-soluble salts, root-in
No.
solutions?
No.
Or have you heard of it? Have you seen it? Do you have any?
I have heard of it.
Okay. Can you elaborate a little bit on your on what you have seen?
We just have never done it. And, you know, I always think IBA needs to be at the base of the stem. Maybe it's just habit. Mike, have you used it?
Am I on still? Yeah, Mark. We were talking. Mark Griffith and Jeff Beasley and I were talking about it yesterday. Mark uses it on things that typically burn, even with KIBA and in water, and like 1,000 to 1,500 parts per million. And I think Mark uses the lower rates, but he uses it on lower pedalum. And you remember, I don't know if some of you remember, Easter region, we were at Bailey Nursery, and they use it extensively, as I remember. I think they run it right through their moving mist systems, and it seems to work pretty well. I'm kind of with Dave. It doesn't make physiological sense in that it's usually looking at absorption going through the stem, and is it moving down through the foliage, or is it just dripping down the stem? I wondered if it was just dripping down the stem and slowly kind of infusing the cutting or being absorbed that way. I don't know, but it is being used and it does work.
Yesterday, actually, there was a student competition in the East region, and if I remember correctly, the justification of using foliar application is to save labor. For us university folks, we root a couple of hundred and stuff like that. It may not make a difference, but for the nurseries, where they root millions, maybe, that will probably make a huge difference. So, and of course, Cheryl will have the recording up in the IPPS website, so all the members can go back to watch the students' presentation yesterday from the East region.
Hey, there's two great statements in the general chat box. Let me read. We use foliar Hortus auxin and would never go back to powder or dip. Much more uniform, higher rooting percentages. And then Matt Chappell responded saying, it seems like rooting cofactors, for example, honey, are making a comeback with the younger generation. What say you on that?
Who are you talking to? I defer to Mike.
Okay.
No, I defer to Dave. What you say? Honey is in bee honey?
Yes.
No, I have no experience. No idea.
Okay.
I remember last year, Jenny is a PhD student with Dr. Patricia Knight. I think, if I remember correctly, she in her presentation, she added honey in the root-in solution. So again, that will be in last year's IPPS proceedings. Or you could contact either Jenny or Dr. Patricia Knight directly for their presentation.
Hey, and I noticed that Dr. Dirr repeatedly would say, I can't, give you the parentage on this cross, name, et cetera. And so there's a great deal of caution related to discussing these plants. I want to give a shout out to one of our colleagues, Amy Fulcher at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. She and some colleagues, I think it was in 2019, put out a great publication. It's called A Green Industry Guide to Plant Patents and Other Intellectual Property Rights. And the number on that is PB 1882. So peanut butter 1882. So if you're interested in a really good discussion about plant patents, I refer you to that wonderful publication that Dr. Fulcher and her colleagues put out.
Jim, can I comment on that?
You certainly may.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much when you mention parenting, you're kind of opening a can of worms for somebody else to move into your territory. I mean, we started the whole process at UGA with reblooming remontant hydrangeas, and now after Endless Summer came out, and we started in the late 1990s, everyone got on the bandwagon, and they were starting. And if you looked at some of the parentage on the Let's Dance series from Spring Meadow, it's all Endless Summer initially, and then they've moved on from there. But you kind of give the farm away sometimes. But the issue on patents is a kind of a different story. Ted Stevens, Rick Crowder, and a couple others have found a variegated oak leaf hydrangea. It's got a white margin, green center. It's absolutely beautiful. And I asked Ted, I'm wrapping up a hydrangea book of hydrangea revision, and I asked Ted if I could put it in the book. He said, I don't know. So we checked with a patent agent we work with in California. Her name is Cassie Bright. She works with Spring Meadow. She works with international breeders. She's helped me on the hydrangea. She's really good. She said the law's been changed. She said, people worry if I show a plant, does that start the clock on the patent time? She says it does not start the clock. In fact, now you're actually encouraged to talk about your plant and to show your plant. So you can do it in text and you can show pictures, and it does not start the clock. This clock starts a 1-year clock from the time you license someone to propagate that plant, and you better get your patent filed in that 365-day period. But this opens a new window, and she's actually sent me the material from the patent office. This opens a new window for many of our people who are just scared to death to share anything about a potential new plant. And one reason I talked to Jeff and Mark, my partners, Jeff Beasley and Mark Givers, about doing this kind of a show and tell at PII, because we have some wonderful, I don't know if it's wonderful, but I think very good material there. Still needs to be tested more. And I said, there's no fear. I mean, as long as we don't tell them and have them jumpstart, it's kind of like reverse engineering a carburetor or something, and they're not going to be able to do what we do as quickly as we do it. But we're safe, and because nobody's propagated except us, it's evaluated, and even if we send it out under a propagation an evaluation license, and you tell them you cannot propagate it, they can sit there and evaluate it. It can sit there for 5 years, but as long as they don't propagate it, the clock doesn't start. So it's kind of long-winded, but it's absolute, and it's kind of new in patent law, plant patent law.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that really critical information, Dr. Dirr.
You're welcome.
Our international sponsors, Ball Horticulture and Harrell's Fertilizer, and our North American sponsors, Bailey Nurseries, Bayer, ICL Osmocote, Nursery Supplies, Spring Meadow, and Star Roses and Plants. Your investment in IPPS is greatly valued and appreciated. Additional thanks to our Southern Region sponsors, Greenleaf Nursery Company, OHP, and Virginia Nursery and Landscape Association for your continued support.